The guest on today's show was an infantry officer in the United States Marine Corps. His accomplishments include graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy with a degree in applied mathematics, 2 combat deployments to Afghanistan's Helmand Province, once as an infantry platoon commander, my platoon commander, in fact, and as an advisor team's OIC, that's the commanding officer, for his second. He would earn the rank of captain before separating from the Marine Corps, and after his military career, he returned to school at UCLA's Anderson School of Management to earn an MBA, and now works and lives in Florida with his wife. For today's conversation, we take a look at the lessons learned from the preparations for his first deployment to Marjah, Afghanistan, and what it's like leading Marines in combat for the first time. As a disclaimer, the language gets a bit colorful and graphic during this interview, so if that might be a foreseeable problem for you, you might want to switch to another episode now. As always, the views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not those of the U.S. government or any of its branches of military, but are solely of the individual. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Captain Albert Varela. I am Colby Sumner, and this is America, Fog of War.
Pride of our nation, this day have set upon the mighty endeavor, the struggle to preserve our republic. Men's souls will be shaken with the violences of...
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender.
Was found a diary under the heading My Pledge. He had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure.
I really want to know what the Naval Academy was like.
Yeah.
And I hear that you I've heard that you show up your first year. You show up in the summertime. You show up early. Right,
yeah.
For it's almost like a boot camp.
Correct. In a lot of ways it's boot camp. In a lot of ways it's not. I mean,
yeah.
We don't have freaking DIs in our face. We get there. It's actually run by the senior class. So the rising seniors, they are the cadre. They're the DIs, if you will.
Okay.
And so you show up about 6 weeks. It's about 6 weeks. So you show up 6 to 7 weeks before the academic year. It's usually the first week of July or the last week of August. I think they call I Day was August 30th of 2004. And so, yeah, you show up as a civilian and you have a bag of a few things you're allowed to have with you. And I imagine it's kind of similar to y'all getting to boot camp and they take everything away from you. And
you put it in a brown paper bag?
I don't remember. They just take the few things that you're allowed to have and it goes away. And I don't know what they do with it. They store it somewhere. And then, you start kind of going through a gauntlet of different stations. They have these stations set up all throughout the auditorium and or the basketball arena, and places in the dorms. So you're going through all these stations. You're picking up your uniforms. You're getting your head shaved. You're learning how to salute. You're getting dressed for the first time, and
everybody's yelling at you.
Yeah, everyone's freaking yelling at you. I remember we get to this room. We have our all our uniform items at this point for what we wear that summer. So what we wear in the summer are it's the sailor uniform, right? It's they look like pajamas, white pajamas.
Yeah.
White works is what we call them.
Okay.
And we're getting dressed in this room, and the guys are yelling at us to hurry up, and I'm in the lead, and the guys are like cheering me on, like, yeah, look at this guy, he's crushing it. He's gonna be the best here, or whatever. And then I hit a snag, and everyone catches up, and they're like, "Oh, you could have been something here, man. You could have been something here."
Yeah. Is the phrase "it pays to be a winner" said at Annapolis as much as it is in the Marine Corps? Because that's one you hear all the time in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, it's I would say that there's a lot of Marine Corps influence at the Naval Academy. Rightfully so. I had a Marine officer just tell me that the Marine Corps takes its obligation at the Naval Academy very seriously. They send top-notch officers to represent. The Navy, on the other hand, I'm not saying they don't send good officers, but it's just not as high a priority for them. So,
right.
Just about, you get everyone on the spectrum. You get some phenomenal naval officers at the academy, but the Marine Corps officers are always top-notch.
Do you think that the Marine Corps and its influence seemed strong when you were there too, because of the era you were in? You were in a predominantly ground battle era. I think you think that had some kind of influence on the way they kind of took their academics and their education at Annapolis.
Yeah, 100%. I'd say most, if not all, of the officers and senior enlisted that I interacted with, Marine Corps officers and senior enlisted that I interacted with at the academy, were combat vets, had experience in Iraq at the time. So because that was so 2004 is your first year you go. I mean, that's like your Battle of Fallujah's around that era, around that time. Baghdad's already been a thing, so you probably got some very, very experienced and wise people in those positions. So actually that kind of to simplify things for myself and for like listeners, can you break it down for us? Because that's the one special thing about Annapolis versus any of the other military academies, is there's two branches in one that you can choose to go to. You can either choose to go Navy or Marine Corps. And and as we were talking, the Marine Corps has a big influence, but you also get a lot of naval education, I'm sure, as well. Do you how does that work at the academy? And do you get like a say in what you're learning, like class specifics besides your major, like the military aspect of things? Yeah. So it's very, in terms of academics, it's an engineering school. So like primarily you are getting some kind of Bachelor of Science. So even if you're an English major, you're getting the Bachelor of Science degree. I was a math major. And then there are required naval classes. So like there's naval tactics, there's like naval architecture, and these are very Navy centric. It isn't until you can start getting into electives that you can kind of start picking things. And I'm sure the options are different now, but like going into my senior year, I took like Marine Corps history, because at that point I had, going into second semester, I'd already selected to become a Marine. I had a Marine Corps practicum class that was led by Marine instructors, and basically getting you ready for the basic school in Quantico and what to expect there. So it's very Navy focused, but in terms of the academic education, but there's certainly like Marine Corps stuff peppered in. And then like you do have a lot of instructors that are teaching regular classes that are military, right? So I know my roommate, English professor, I think, was a Marine. I didn't have a lot of Marine Corps instructors, but I know there were some like Marine math teachers and stuff like that too. So like you're kind of getting that influence through your regular academic coursework.
So as far as like the military classes, because this has always been something that I've been very curious on, because I grew up a military history nut. I love like learning like military stuff. I was one of the guys going through training in the Marine Corps that was all pumped to learn about to actually learn the military jobs, even if it's a hip pocket class or an actual class, whatever the case is. I was always pretty jazzed about it. But what kind of military classes, like besides Marine Corps history, like what things are you taking in Annapolis that kind of apply directly to what you did in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, I'd say the ones that I felt I got the most out of were more like your leadership classes, your ethics classes, and there were a lot of case studies just around. I mean, you'd watch clips of like these famous movie scenes where there's like some kind of ethical dilemma, and you'd have long conversations in the classroom about it.
Sure.
I think those probably prepared me more than like naval architecture, right? I never, had to float boats in the Marine Corps, but those classes at least provided. Everyone has their own kind of internal morals and ethics that they apply when they're, leading men.
Yeah.
But I think those kind of provided a framework and kind of a history and some stories that you could kind of apply. So
it's giving you the institutional morals kind of to be like
right.
giving you the framework of the institutional morals to kind of put yourself in line with to make you more successful in the military.
One thing that comes to mind is we learned a lot about Admiral James Stockdale, who was a Navy pilot during Vietnam. He ends up being a POW for I think over 5 years.
Is this the one Christian Bale made the movie about? Where he gets shot down behind enemy lines. He's like, it's early in the war.
What was his name? Stockdale?
Yeah, James Stockdale.
Okay.
He ended up being an admiral. He ended up being Ross Perot's like running mate in like the 90s when he ran for president. Yeah, a Medal of Honor recipient.
Okay.
But this guy, you talk about torture and just he knew that even in those dire circumstances, because he was the senior guy in the POW camp, and they had their whole communication method where they can talk to each other, and he took leadership in that position, and kind of always, we learn about him in the context of stoicism, being able to kind of mentally rise above all the pain and suffering. So I think that was, although I never experienced anything near what he had to, like, I would always think, we were in the field and it was miserable and cold or whatever. And I would think about him, getting tortured in Vietnam, being like, okay, if he can like lead his men through that, like I can survive this hike,
It is. Well, it is. It's all a perspective thing. And if you can get your mind looking at things from the right perspective, then you can win any battle. It's interesting that you use the phrase stoic, because I feel like the stoic mentality seems to work. Like it seems to be the one that's best to emulate or like work towards emulating in a military setting as a leader, because there's a lot of like in the military, I feel that the best leaders are always the ones that shoulder the responsibility and burden themselves instead of deflect it off to their subordinates. Which is a very stoic take on things, like to me it seems like. I've always found the military academies in general fascinating. Being a Marine, I find the Naval Academy just a little extra more fascinating. One other thing I was going to ask you about from your time there is I heard that it's like mandatory that you have to participate in sports.
Yeah.
Yes. Is it one or two sports?
You just have to be enrolled in some type of sport throughout the year.
Okay.
So for the majority of people, it's just going to be intramural sports. And,
gotcha.
Yeah. And so, after school, after classes, I think I did like cross country because I was a runner, and softball. And I did play, what was it called? I think it's handball. It's very violent.
Handball's no joke.
But it was like a more tackle version of handball. And like dudes were, it was so funny because they didn't have enough people on the team, and so they like made me and my buddy, and we had selected Marine Corps at this point. They made us play, and we're like, dude, we're not. There's a guy in our company that we had the previous year that had selected Marine Corps and got hurt playing this stupid game. Really? And they made him go to the Navy because he has a restricted line, and we were like, no, we're not gonna. We played a couple games, but we were like, not about it. I'm going on a tangent here, but yeah, you have to play a sport. So if you're like in a varsity sport or in a club sport, that counts also, obviously. But for the most people, it's like me, it was intramurals. But
yeah,
the idea being that you want to make sure that people are staying fit and really just getting that competitive nature out of people.
Are they doing PT and stuff every morning, like as a school?
No. That's one thing that's kind of unfortunate. I'd be interested to hear how they do it over at West Point, because from what I've heard from people that went to West Point, it's a little more military centric, whereas I think the Naval Academy focuses a little more on academics.
Yeah.
But but I will say in terms of like required PT, when you're a freshman, it's kind of like they make the freshmen kind of live more of a life that you would expect out of a military academy. So
sure.
There was definitely required every Saturday morning, there was PT for the freshmen. A lot of companies did require their freshmen to do like some kind of morning PT if they weren't doing like a club or varsity sport. I don't remember that being the case for my company that often. I mean, we would probably do it once in a while if we were in trouble or something. And then there actually was remedial PT. This was required for all classes if you had failed like the PRT or which is like the physical readiness test.
Don't be failing your physical fitness tests, man. That's it. Yeah. That's true throughout your entire military career.
Oh yeah.
You gotta pass those, and not just pass them. You gotta like finish in the top.
Yeah.
As close to perfect as you can. All right. Well, so you finished up your training at the academy, and you've said you selected Marine Corps. How does that work? And then take us from like selecting the Marine Corps, and now you're off to fight the good fight with the Corps.
Yeah. So officially, you going into your senior year, you go into a module and you literally just rank what all the service selections are, and you kind of rank what you want to do. So for me, number 1 was Marine Corps Ground, number 2 was Marine Corps Air, and then I think I put submarines third. Yeah, I know. And then I think maybe I put like Special Forces, and then Navy pilot, then like Navy surface warfare. So you have like I had like less than 10. I think it's more now, but you basically rank them. And there are boards that represent each service that kind of look at all the candidates and see what your careers look like, how your academic performance has been, how your military performance has been, and they'll pick you. So something like surface warfare going into the Navy is not as competitive because the majority of people are going to end up going into that.
Right.
Being like a Navy pilot is super competitive. Being a Marine is pretty competitive, and then Special Forces, of course, is the most competitive. But so even though you have this like selection going into your senior year, but really the work to be selected begins earlier. So I'd say by your sophomore year going into your junior year, you should already have a pretty good idea of what it is you want to do, and you kind of start picking your summer training based off that. So, I did I think going into junior year, I did a 4-week thing called, what do we call it? Approach Mid, which is like professional training for midshipmen, where you do a week in Quantico, you do a week at a submarine base, you do a week at an airfield. Like you kind of just do the round robin.
I was an instructor for one of those. I think it was just before you actually got to 2-9 for the first deployment. We had just gotten back from Ramadi. That's where I met Bill.
Bill?
Yeah,
from supply or
No, from our interview a few months ago. Bill.
Oh, okay. Bill, yes, that's right, Bill.
It's an alias we have to use for this person. They can't have their name out. But yeah, I was in charge of the small, like when they came out, the midshipmen were there, like shooting the 240, like watching us shoot the small. They had the 60s out there. So it was like the infantry weapons.
And they're all dressed in blue. Are they blue bodies?
I don't remember what they were wearing.
They probably have the old woodland. At least in my time, they have the old woodland, like Navy
the tricolor woodlands.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what they had or not. I can't remember, to be honest with you, man. I don't know. I don't remember. Now that you asked me that, I remember like where we were at. I remember exactly where we were at. It's out where the big tower on Lejeune, like if you're walking out towards Sneed's Ferry from French Creek, you know where the big like radio tower thing is with the big berm. We were out there. That's where the range was. And I remember hiking past that tower so many times.
Oh, in the tank tracks,
right
in the sand. Oh man, very bad.
So that would have been. So like I said, I did the Protramid where I got to do a little bit of everything. I think in lieu of doing that, you could have done that training, which was just going down to either Lejeune or to Pendleton for a few weeks and hanging out with the Marines. Yeah. And so like if you're doing that training, you're kind of setting yourself up so that when you do select the Marine Corps, the board is looking and saying like, oh, did they do any like Marine Corps specific training? Okay, cool, they did. Their academic performance is good. All right, yeah, we'll take them.
Yeah.
So you transition. I'm a little bit unfamiliar with this situation, but you go from Annapolis to OCS in Quantico. Is that the next step after you get through here?
So it used to be that Naval Academy graduates would be required to go to OCS, which is Officer Candidate School. It's kind of the officer version of boot camp.
Now,
I don't know.
Why would they require that though? Because from what I've been aware of, most military academies, like, you get to bypass that because of that. Like, it seems
they do now. So when I went through, I did not have to go through OCS, and I'm pretty sure that's still how it is. So somewhere along the line, somebody made the decision that like, hey, these academy guys have already been through their military trainings or their basic training, so
right.
We go right to the basic school, which is in Quantico. So all Marine Corps officers, whether you're going to be a pilot or a lawyer or infantry officer, don't matter. You go through the 6 months of the basic school in Quantico, and it's really infantry focused. So let me kind of backtrack. So coming out of the academy, you go right into the basic school, or coming right out of OCS, if you're going through a non-academy route, you finish up those trainings, and then everyone starts at the basic school together. So you're in there with, the class that I joined with was primarily Naval Academy people, but there were a bunch of OCS graduates that were there as well. So you're all integrated. And yeah, that's 6 months, basic infantry skills, really. It's very infantry focused, but also, a lot of leadership and rifle range and all that stuff.
You're learning how to like dis and ass weapons, and you're learning
Totally.
bounding and like small unit tactics and
Totally.
all the platoon level stuff you might need to employ at some point.
Very similar to like a workup, right? You start with your individual skills, build up to fire team, squad, platoon, and then you do your patrol ranges, your mount ranges, all that stuff.
Now, are they giving you any kind of education or instruction on like principles of warfare? Like that, I guess that's more accurate. Are you learning principles of warfare when you're going to school?
Yeah, so we did, what was the method called? Not case study. I know they're doing case studies now, but it's essentially that, right? You're taking, and this is kind of very, very much at the small unit level. So I'm trying to remember if there were any that were put into actual real life battle context, but all these case studies really did originate from small arm tactic, like actual history there. But so you would like learn a skill, maybe a squad level skill, and you'd have like a case where, enemy, a 3-person enemy position, you're a squad, here's the terrain. You kind of learn it in the classroom, then you would go kind of play it out on what were the, like
a sand map or something, like
a terrain map. Terrain model.
Terrain model.
Yeah, so you go play it out on terrain model, and then you do a field op like the next week and kind of apply your skills. So that was kind of the method that he taught us with.
Okay.
I know that, and then so we're split up into platoons, and each platoon had a different captain that was your staff platoon commander. Mine was a badass. He was Remedial veteran, Bronze Star V.
That's sick.
Yeah, and he actually, really good dude. Quist was his name. I'm trying to remember his first name, but he had just like this awesome experience, and he did a couple of like, no kidding, this is shit that I was in field studies for us, which was really cool.
Well, that's also so important because like you getting the lesson, especially in that environment, because anybody sitting in your shoes is looking at someone that's been to combat with like, like these just in awe eyes, right? Like they are what you are striving to be, you know what I mean? And they've done it successfully, and they've done it for real. Like they've been in combat. So when they're able to give you a lesson directly, that's going to apply to you directly, especially being 100%. An infantry officer. It sticks in a way that no other lesson can kind of stick in there. It seems to latch on pretty tight. At least it didn't in my experiences too.
Yeah, and I always considered myself very fortunate because my instructors during this whole period, right, at the basic school And then also when I went to infantry officer training, you're talking about dudes that had been in the shit in Iraq, and they knew it, and they knew their stuff. And actually, we did have one guy too at basic school who actually was a West Point graduate, but he was an Afghan veteran. So that was kind of rare too, to have like the Afghan experience at that point.
Yeah, because it wasn't until because when you finished at Annapolis and when we joined, that whole era was like the surge era,
right?
And so up until that point, really the only stuff coming out of Afghanistan, I mean, even you can even say the Restrepo, like Restrepo and whatnot. Well, that what is that like? That would have been like 07, 08 time frame. So that's still in the same era as when we joined. So there's not too much known about Afghanistan. I mean, there's really not a lot on the news. Iraq up until this point had been like the main focus.
Yeah, this guy was telling us that when they were in Afghanistan, they had Soviet maps because our intel hadn't caught up yet, right?
That's crazy. That's crazy. It's just bonkers to think about. But it's so good because both of your deployments were to Afghanistan. So to have like someone there with operational knowledge of the area, man, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, so I have a question about being in the infantry officer training. So you're there, you want to be an infantry officer.
Yeah.
Is that something you're focused on the entire time and that's what you're going to achieve at the end of the 6 months? Or are there guys that come in like that and they change their mind and decide, well, I'm going to take a slightly different route? How does that work at that point?
It's super funny because, I mean, when you start at the basic school, you either know you're going ground or air, right? So if you're a pilot, you're already a pilot. But for the ground folks, I mean, you're competing / deciding what MOS you want to get into. And it's funny because like the first week you're there, they'll ask, all right, who wants to be infantry? And like freaking everyone's hand goes up.
Everybody.
And then after the first field op, it's like,
not as many go.
Not so much. But I don't know. I kind of toyed around with some stuff. Like I think I was always interested in going infantry, but I kind of dabbled in asking questions about like combat engineering and ground intelligence. I knew for sure I wanted to do a combat arms MOS, but it wasn't. Yeah, at some point it kind of morphed into like, okay, I know for sure I want to be in the infantry. But the way that it works, it's a really interesting system they have set up. They call it a quality spread, right? So each class is about 300 Marine officers, and they'll divvy that up into 3 sections, basically, right? All by rank, right? So your top 100, your top 101 to 199, and then like your top 200 to 300 or whatever. So then they'll take like the needs of the Marine Corps. So like, hey, for this class, we have 20 infantry or 30 infantry spots. Then they will spread that out to the different tiers. So the top 100 will get 10 spots, the middle 100 will get 10 spots, and the top or the bottom 300 will get 10 spots. So you're not
instead of giving it all in the top.
Exactly. So that way you have this quality spread throughout your officer corps and the Marine Corps. It's not a perfect system because people do get screwed over, but at the same time, it's probably best for the Marine Corps. So you're not getting.
You get good officers everywhere, and you also get not the best officers everywhere.
Exactly.
It evens it out. I appreciate that. That's It sucks for
and
whoever is like done really well though and wants infantry and doesn't get infantry.
Right. So like, I mean, I feel like I did well there, but I probably was not top like tier. So I was probably like in the middle tier somewhere. And so I think because of that quality spread, I was toward the top of the middle tier. So I was able to get, infantry. Yeah. Also there's a little bit, so they'll put that into like a mathematical model to figure out how to best optimize people's choices to those slots that are available. But then there's an awful lot of back and forth with all the captains, the staff platoon commanders to say like, okay, this guy was in the top of the class and he really wants infantry, but he sucks in the field. So I'm going to take this spot that could have been his and I'm going to give it to that tier or that tier. So there's a lot of like back and forth. And so that's another area where I'm like I feel like I was really blessed to have an infantry guy as my staff platoon commander because I know he was, I think coincidentally, his platoon ended up having the most infantry officers come out of it, right?
Well,
that's good stuff.
Also too, that just for anybody out there thinking about doing this, when just know you're always being watched and assessed. If you're going through any training, officer or enlisted, you are always being watched and assessed. There's never a moment you're not. And like, even when you're not being watched, do like 100%. We were just talking about this earlier, do the right thing, because it'll come back and bite you. It'll come back and bite you if you don't.
One of the things I love about living in the era I do is how easy so many things have become. One of those things is shopping, whether it's for a last-minute gift or for my groceries. The things I need are literally at my fingertips, and that is because I am an Amazon Prime member. I use my Amazon Prime membership every day, and Colby does too. There are so many benefits that come with a Prime membership, and you might not be aware of all they have to offer. I know I wasn't using everything my Prime membership gave me access to, but now I will be. Become an Amazon Prime member and get access to the same benefits as well as exclusive ways to shop, stream, and save. Things like fast, free ways to get orders like 2-day, 1-day, and same-day delivery, as well as 2-hour grocery delivery. Instant streaming of thousands of movies and TV shows, unlimited ad-free access to over 1 million songs and hundreds of playlists, and unlimited full-resolution online photo storage with 5 gigabytes free video storage. Visit AmericaFogOfWar.com and follow the link Try Amazon Prime, located in the menu at the top of the homepage, and you too can experience life with the power of Amazon Prime at your fingertips.
One of my good buddies in that trained at the basic school, really good dude, super good shape, really smart, like perfect. He would have been a perfect candidate. He wanted to be infantry. Would have been a great candidate. And the dude just had like a couple of bad incidences where he just got caught like with his pants down, And like one time, like he went to the bathroom, he left his saw like in formation, right? I mean, little things, right, that you would probably slap a boot for, but like,
right.
It's just like a brain fart. And so like there's that. And so once he got on the staff's radar, it was just like every little thing he did wrong just got amplified. And I just felt so bad for him because I know he wanted to be an infantry officer. And I forget what he ended up becoming, but, like you said, he was constantly being watched.
Right. Yeah, constantly. And that's the thing, too, is once you are on the radar, like, good luck. It's so much harder to come off the radar than it is to get on the radar. I just think about that. I mean, even from my own personal experience of having, like, being in charge of people and then having someone get on my radar. It's like it takes a lot for them to come off the radar. Like I'm always I'm gonna be double checking everything and then hitting them harder because they keep messing up something. Yeah. Also, don't forget your weapon.
Just
don't forget your weapon.
That was particularly bad.
That'll get you. That's a guaranteed spot on the list.
Yeah.
That made me think that we don't have to talk about this right now, but I'm gonna throw it out there just so we remember it for later. But I'm pretty sure. It was you were there. This was the CAC that we went to together. Was the one where everybody, all the officers went to Vegas.
Oh yes, they did.
We did not get to go to Vegas.
But that was on yours. That was on your first CACs, or was that the CACs before you got there?
That had to have been the one before we got there. I heard about it.
Oh, it was bad. It was so. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
It was bad. Dude.
I got, I was actually going to leave myself. We a couple of other guys were going out to go to the movies, but we didn't know that the officers all went out to Vegas. Well,
they did. They all left. They left the base and went to Vegas.
I didn't want to leave the base, but that was the day I got sunburned. That was the worst sunburn.
You were supposed to go to the movies with me, and I did go to the movies. Yeah. I did leave the base that day, and I got back in time, and all the officers did not. I mean, by a long time too. We're talking like next day, long time. Jeez. Like they were out, just not showing up for formation. It was bad. It was bad. I thought officers were going to be getting sent left and right, like out of the unit. It was bad.
I guess if you do it together, they don't really have a choice.
Right. So we can't replace all of them.
Everybody.
It was indeed like all of them.
Everybody's UA.
They were all hungover too.
Probably except Tiny.
I don't think Heine went. I don't think he went.
I don't know.
I don't want to say anyone's
name. If I think about it, I want to say that he said something along the lines of like, if the Marines can't go, why should I be going? And didn't go because of that.
What a good dude. What a good
Right.
dude.
See, that's
right?
exactly what I would think about.
That's exactly Pat right there.
That's
But
exactly him.
even I will say, so it was never really in the cards for us to go because remember Colonel Fullwood, he was just not about that life. But I remember Mac telling me, he's like, sir, if the officers get to go to Vegas and the Marines can't, you better not fucking go. Like, Roger that, dude. Roger that.
We gotta come back to Gunny Mac because I have many questions on that dynamic.
Yeah.
But real quick, and we'll skip across this because we want to get to the deployment here. But just real fast, the basic school is not the end of your training though. After that,
Correct.
you go to IOC, correct?
Correct.
And
So,
an IOC is infantry officer course.
The infantry officer course, the infamous infantry officer course.
I've heard it is no joke. So Stokes was actually an instructor there briefly.
Oh yeah, nice.
And he was telling me I was talking to him one day on the phone and he was like, dude, he's like, now I know why officers say we're gonna go on an easy run and it'll end up being like a 7-mile run. It's because that is an easy day for them here,
Every
man.
time.
Yeah.
Fill us in on
officer-
that real quick. That's
So after the basic school, they basically have courses running all year round for the basic school and for infantry officer course. And so you end up like going to the infantry officer course with the other, like the next basic school class that was in the chute. So I had like a 3-month period between the basic school and infantry officer course. So it was awesome because like all the guys that picked infantry got to live together and like just like work out, do McMath and like eat and lift, and it was just sick bro time. And then we'd like hit up DC every weekend. But yeah, okay. Fast forward.
That sounds like a lot of fun. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It was a great time, and then it was funny because you have like I want to say the broke company. I hate saying that, but like my company, the holding company for people going to the basic school.
Yeah.
And like they had their leadership that was always like, hey, we need to get the IOC platoon to formation at 5 a.m. and all this stuff. And our guy in charge was like, yeah, we're not doing that. Yeah, we're doing our own thing. We're doing IOC stuff. Yeah. But anyways,
the surge was great because you get a lot of that.
Time.
There was a lot of that with infantry during the surge. Like, no, we're not doing that, which was fantastic. I have to imagine that like peacetime and garrison Marine Corps is probably not the same and probably not as satisfying in that aspect. But continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So the infantry officer course, it's 3 months. And you kind of start from the beginning and you do everything that you kind of learned before, but a little more intense. So, you start with your individual skills, build up to fire team, to squad, to platoon. And then it culminates with like a mini CAX in 29 Palms, which is freaking phenomenal. And the infantry officer course, it's just imagine the best training that you ever had and add like unlimited rounds and just like the top infantry minds in the Marine Corps as your instructors.
Which is incredible. It's incredible.
It's incredible training. It's a kick in the nuts for sure, because everything's just intensified.
Well, I heard like the example. So the example Stokes gave me, like when he was instructing there, is they might have just like the students, the officers in training might have just finished doing a 15-mile hike out into the woods, and they stop and there's like a 50 cal exhibit on the side of the road, and it's like it's broken down, and they reassemble it, and then they disassemble it again, and he said he would like the main instructor would look at his watch and be like, okay, it's 11:30, you've got 20 minutes, be back at the barracks, showered and changed over into the proper uniform, and have the weapon put away. And they're like 20 minutes is exaggeration, but they might be like 5 miles from the barracks, and they have to like huff it back with a 50 cal because he said the instructor just gets in the truck and drives off. Yeah, like leaves them to figure it out, which I feel is where you get the big difference between enlisted training and officer training. Yeah. And what I've kind of gathered is they leave a lot of that decision making power up to you guys to kind of exercise that ability. It's
so I'll speak to it as much as I can, and it's funny because you come out of IOC and you're told like, you don't talk about IOC, right? It's like super secretive and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It's not like anything crazy there happens. It's not like we're learning, about all this new tech or top secret stuff. It's just that so much of the training relies on that element of surprise that you don't want the information to get out to the next generation.
So
that
they're
like,
getting through
I
easy.
know what's coming next, right? So it's
right.
Because all of it is the mental game of like, exactly to your point, like you think you're done, but you're not, right?
And it's gonna suck really bad. This
and
next
it's gonna
part you
and
have
it's
to
gonna
do.
right, and it's not like it's meant to break you, but it's meant to make you push through past what you thought you can go through, right? And it's not gonna be like SEAL training. It's not gonna be like probably even a lot of the special forces around the world, but it's gonna be a kick in the nuts. And they just want to know that like when the shit hits the fan and your Marines are tired and you're ready, the platoon's ready to give up, are you gonna be that leader that can step up and be like, no, we got to keep going? That's really what the training is ultimately meant to do, but at the same time just give you really high quality training on the technical side and the tactical side as well. But like, yeah, there's definitely many examples of like, you just did the field op, you're coming back, and your vehicle transportation breaks down, hit an IED, right? Oh, we got to run it back, there's plenty of that going on. Or like, hey, you pack out your meals for the week, or they tell you pack out for one day, pack out food for 3 meals for one day, and for the rest of the week your resupply is getting cut off by enemy forces, right? So like,
make it last.
Mm-hmm. So
there's nothing worse than being in the field, being hungry, like if you don't have enough to eat, like you're hungry, because you're also probably running all over the place and expending all kind of energy.
100%.
So when you're tired and hungry, oh my gosh, man, like that makes me think of the Scout Sniper in Doc, and like looking like a skeleton after 2 days worth of it. You know what I mean? Just all sunken in, eyes are like way back in your head, and you're just a zombie. But man, you figure out how to do it, and the Marine Corps is really good at like showing you the way to figure out how to do it.
Right. And you rely on your team, you rely on the guy next to you, right? And like, you just push through. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal training. And I remember, I don't know if you remember like coming back from the first deployment, and we got our new Marine recruits in, and there were some like issues with stuff going on in the barracks, unsanctioned training going on in the barracks, I'll call it. I just remember I would always tell this to the Marines, like, if you resort to hazing, a lot of the times it's just a lack of imagination. Right. Because you can make a Marine suffer with really good training. It doesn't have to be, you know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
Like, some of the stuff that I heard going on in the barracks, I'm like, yeah, that sucks, but that's not as bad as the freaking hike I did at IOC, right?
Right.
So if you really wanted to, if you had the imagination and the creativity, you can design really good training that also broke some people,
Exactly. And
That's
there's ways. Like I felt like my entire time going through the Marine Corps, I always looked, because you get examples of leaders all over the place, and every kind of leader there is, from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other side. And I always tried to take like the leaders that I liked like working for and being around, or who I wanted to work for, because they were awesome. And I tried to pick out like the things that I liked about them, and what it was that they were doing that made me like them, because you want to work for those guys more than someone that you might be scared of but you don't like, And one thing that I always used to dwell on is, I have to go to combat with these guys. Like, I don't want to beat them up and like have them hate me, and then we get overseas and now I want them to be buddy with me when we're under fire. I mean, I know a Marine will do their duty, but like, you don't want to be, you don't want to have the guy watching your back hate you because you've been, hazing them for.
Well, there's always going to be a little bit of that, right? Working. There's always going to be a little bit of that, but you don't want to, like you said, overdo it.
Right.
There should be like a healthy fear.
Exactly. Which is so attainable in so many ways.
So talking about healthy fear, for us, coming out of infantry school, on that last day or that second to last day, we get assigned the unit that we're going to. So there's, of course, always rumors, but what's it going to be? And then they tell you, you're going to 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines.
Golf company.
Yeah, golf company. And you're going to get on this bus and you're going to drive right across New River. At what point do you receive this information and then get to the fleet?
Yeah. So you learn that at the infantry officer course. I think with the other MOSs, they learned what unit they were going to before they went to their school. But for us, yeah, we find out in the infantry officer course. And I can't remember. I think it's like halfway through. But there's a lot of communication going on between the staff platoon commanders, like all the captains, and they're talking to their counterparts in the fleet, saying like, hey, the guys in the fleet are saying we need a guy that's ready to go in the next 2 months because we're deploying as soon as we get them. And so they'll kind of say, okay, that guy's ready to go. Or for us, 2-9 was one of the battalions that just needed a ton of officers. I think we sent like 10 or something like that. And so they'll just say like, hey, we need this many people. Like we're not looking for anything specific. We just need, bodies here and like, just make sure they're not shitbags.
Right.
But we find out that way. And it's kind of works similar to anything else. You rank your choices. I picked West Coast first. I wanted to be at Pendleton.
Everybody does.
Yeah, right. Oh, dude, this pissed me off. Side story. So like the whole time, it was you picked West Coast or East Coast as your top, or Hawaii. Those are how you ranked it. And if you picked West Coast, you got to you could also have the chance of going to 29 bombs.
Right.
So that deterred a lot of dudes. A lot of dudes were like, "Fuck that! I'd rather just not risk it and go to the East Coast." Not me. I was like, I want West Coast no matter what. So I always had West Coast as my number one spot. Literally, like the day or two before they gave us our assignments, they're like, hey, we just found out there are no 29 palm spots. So if you pick West Coast, you're only getting Pendleton. We'll let you change your choices if you want. So of course, like everybody picks West Coast. So kind of like muddied the waters for me. But
they shouldn't have said anything. They shouldn't have said anything. Man. And just rewarded the guys that were committed to the West Coast from the get-go.
That's what I thought. But I'm super glad it worked out the way it did because I wouldn't have had you guys.
Right. But, well, and that's how it is, too, because there's things I wanted to do. Like I had joined initially to do recon. And by the time I got to SOI, they weren't doing recon. They weren't doing recon tryouts or NDOC on the East Coast anymore. They were only doing it on the West Coast. And my instructor was like, well, we can send you to the West Coast, but you'll start SOI over again. I was like, no, thank you. I'll just go on the way I'm going right now.
Yeah. But I remember when we found out at the time, 2-9 was supposed to do a MEU.
Yeah.
And so you're a lieutenant just that's going through this ball busting training, and you find out like all your peers are going to Afghanistan, and you're going to be on a MEU. I remember like going into the room with all the 2-9 guys, and we're all just like looking down on the ground, like, fuck this, Not only am I going East Coast, but now I'm going to be stuck on a MEU.
Let's elaborate on that a little bit because, and we've talked about it a little bit before on the show, but like that's definitely a feeling I had too because I remember when they were talking about us possibly going on a MEU.
Me too.
And it we did do Remedial, but it wasn't like what I didn't get what I wanted out of it. There wasn't we had one IED incident the whole time we were there, and I only showed up to it as a part of a quick reaction force. Our Afghanistan deployment was more in line with what I was looking to find, or at least have an experience with. And I remember they were talking about the MEU, like sending us on a MEU. It's very much it's a bummer. You're like, God dang, man. I was excited because I'd get to see some like cool places, but not do at all what you signed up to do. I just
thought it was a rumor. I never thought much about it. I just thought, well, we're going to be here and we're starting our work up and got to go to AP Hill. And now what does this have to do? What does this have to do with the MEU? So I didn't even know if it was ever going to happen.
Thank God, though. Little did you guys know at the time. It changed, huh? Like you're sitting in that room bummed out about it, and then a few months later, you're hooking and jabbing in some of the more kinetic fighting the Marine Corps had out of either war.
Yeah, I remember we got to the unit, and I think we sat down with Colonel Fullwood, and I think he was pretty open about it. Like, I'm trying to get us to Afghanistan.
So So real quick,
Wow.
walk us through that. Like, what is it like as a new officer showing up to your unit? Like, I mean, I know you have to do all your check-in duties on base and like you have to go check in at every place on Earth, but like getting into the unit, talking to the CO, the battalion commander, and then like getting assigned what your actual command will be, and then integrating and all that. What's that process like?
Yeah. So from what I understand, that a lot of those decisions are already made through your instructors at IOC with the unit. Okay. So I think they probably looked, if I'm just kind of being honest, they probably looked at somebody like me and said, you know what, this guy is good to go. He's in shape. He knows his stuff. He's kind of a little introverted at first. So maybe, put him with like a good, sound, like calm leader. Mm-hmm. And I have a feeling that like I probably got matched up with Heine for that reason. Right. But I could be wrong because Kirsch is like the opposite, kind of an opposite personality as me. So like, so he ended up with Heine too. So I'm not sure how much that played into it, but from what I understand, a lot of that communication happens at the infantry officer course. They kind of already have an idea, at least an idea of like who's going to go where when they get to the unit. Yeah. But of course, like once you get there, things can change. Like the Stromlock example, right? Like the XO, for whatever reason, had it out for this guy as soon as we get there. So as soon as he had an opportunity to send him away, he did.
Yeah. So that brings up an interesting topic for me, and we don't have to like get into specifics and drop any names, but it is kind of a world that I have obviously no idea of like what it's like, but the politics in the officer realm of things, when you get to a unit, what is the I guess the political sphere, like the work environment like between officers, and then does being an Annapolis grad, is it like a good old boys club almost? Like, are there benefits to that, or is that not the case?
No, there really isn't. Which is a great thing about the Marine Corps, because I've heard the Navy's different.
Yeah.
And it's probably a good thing. I think to the extent that like, oh, you went to the academy too, and you can kind of like bullshit about your time at the academy, or like maybe ground. Football and stuff. Like, so you might make some connections there that you might not have otherwise. But like Dean, right? Jason Dean.
Love
him. Great dude. And we can talk about like a bad experience I had with him. Not anyone's fault. But but yeah, like he's the academy guy, right? And so he was always cool to bullshit with. He's a good dude. But like,
he was my first platoon commander on our first deployment, and he's a big dude, man.
Yeah.
He's just he was a boxer at Annapolis too. That's scary. Yep. That's scary. Oh, yeah. That's a scary thought. Jason Dean jabbing you.
Jump in.
And he's just a good dude. Like he gave a shit about the Marines. And I would say individually, so you show up, right? And like your immediate people that you go to for mentorship are the senior lieutenants, right?
Yeah, like your XO.
And your XOs, your weapons platoon commanders, because they just did the deployment and everything. The dynamic that we had with ours, I don't think was very healthy. And I think like individually, like one-on-one, all the dudes were pretty good dudes. But for whatever reason, when you got them together, it just became this like, oh, we're the senior guys and you're the fucking dudes, and we're gonna like shit on you.
Yeah.
Because there were times where like they would make us go out and have like they call it the Lieutenant Protection Agency, right? The LPA. I don't know if you ever heard that term, but we'd have like these LPA events, and we'd go out with them, and we'd go out at the bar, and they would of course like circle up and like be talking to each other, and we'd be like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like they don't even want to hang out with us. And so we'd go like off and like try to do our own thing, and they would come pull us back to like, hey, you're here with the guys tonight. You're not like trying to
but they won't talk to you.
But yeah, it's just this weird dynamic. Not Heine. Heine was fucking amazing. Dean was cool. But there were some other guys there especially that were like, come on, dude.
Making it tough.
We always kind of theorized, and this is complete like speculation, but we always theorized it's because we actually got to go to a combat deployment.
Right.
Like we were teed up for a combat deployment versus them that had
the Remedial
first
one we had.
Right. So I think that was part of it.
Which was a patrolling deployment in trucks.
Yeah.
So you just patrolled in trucks and stood post.
Right. But
by
so,
the time we got there.
so you come into the fleet and you have a leadership role. You're a lieutenant. You're going to have a platoon of your own. You come to the platoon. You're in charge. But every sergeant, staff sergeant, gunny, they're all invasion Marines, Nasiriyah, Ramadi. They've all fought and have this experience. How do you navigate like your leadership role and navigating around them or with them rather, and then also being a leader to like the entire platoon?
Yeah, no, it's not easy. Especially, I'm the kind of guy who, again, I'm pretty social, but I'm also kind of introverted. So it takes me a little bit to kind of warm up and be myself. And so I think I had a couple of approaches. One is I listen to your senior guys, right? Which can kind of get you in trouble too, and we can talk about that. But it's always like that's always an easy default for a new lieutenant. It's like listen to your platoon sergeant, listen to your senior, your squad leaders. They have the experience. They're gonna guide you through it. There's that recognizing like who the lieutenants I can go to. So Heine was a clear example of someone I really admired and could always talk to. But then also just like being yourself, not trying to come off as, I wanted to avoid coming off as like a hard ass that was just going to try to run everyone to the dirt. I think of like David Schwimmer and Band of Brothers, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. What not to do when you're
exactly
platoon commander.
Colby, like you brought it up earlier, right? Like you look at, you take your career, you look at all these leaders and you try to take all these good things about everyone that you interact with and try to apply it to yourself. But like the opposite is very true too. Just seeing like bad examples of leadership.
And what not to do.
Yeah. So just trying to avoid that. And then probably the last thing was just trying to slowly earn the respect of the platoon, whether that be through knowledge or PT really. Like I'll never forget the first field op I did with the guys. And like at this point I think everyone's still kind of warming up to me or still trying to skeptical of me maybe. They're
still shaking off that like that post-deployment leave I don't care mentality.
Right.
Like start of the workup kind of mentality.
Right. And it doesn't help that I look like I'm fucking like 16 years old either, right? And I'm like at that point I'm probably like 140 pounds soaking wet.
And, that's the best build for an infantryman. You can run all day that weight.
Yeah.
I remember we did like a patrol op and we bivouacked, and then the next day I had like a fruit fly had bit me. So my lip is all swollen. So of course I know I'm getting shit for that. But then we hiked from there to the grenade range and I fucking like broke the guys.
Did you?
Not broke them, but like, you gotta
right? Get them a little bit.
Keep it moving.
To the point, I don't know if you remember, there was a guy, can't remember his name. He was like 6'6", bald, goofy looking dude.
What platoon?
Would he have been in 3rd platoon?
He would have been in 3rd platoon.
Did he deploy with us?
He deployed with you to Remedial, yeah.
But he didn't come to Marjah?
No, he got out.
Oh,
I know. Did he look like? I don't want to say that. That's mean. He looked kind of crazy.
Kind of like he just had like a kind of goofy demeanor too.
I know. I don't know his name, but I know who you're talking about. I know who you're talking about.
But I remember him, and obviously he's like a big dude, and he's a kind of a stud physically. I remember him like coming up to me during the hike as we're hiking. He's like, "Hey, sir. You really got to slow down. You're losing a lot of the guys. Like this is, we still have a long day ahead of us." And I just remember kind of looking at me like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Is this fast? I didn't realize I was going fast."
It had to feel so good.
Yeah. So I think little things like that, I think start at least showing like, all right, this guy's not, just some little dude that's trying to play Marine for the day.
Right.
Pushover.
And then I had a very different experience, a little bit of a different experience from my peers because I didn't have like a set platoon sergeant right off the bat.
Right.
Like, if you remember Gunny Treat, he was kind of,
Yep.
And you know how Gunny Treat is.
Yes.
And so he's kind of like filling in a little bit. And then I had Sergeant Chapman.
I don't remember him.
I remember Chapman. He was, actually it would have been Staff Sergeant Treat still actually.
Actually, you're right. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
would have
it
been
would've-
Staff Sergeant
Yep.
Sergeant Chapman. He was, I would say, shorter guy, and he was like in the platoon the whole time.
Yeah.
3rd platoon, right?
Very smart guy.
Yeah.
He knew his shit, but I hate to say it, but he had some drinking issues.
Blonde hair, I think. I don't know how I can remember some of these things.
I don't remember him.
Yeah.
I don't remember him. But then that was before I got tasked out to you guys, though, too. Which, I mean,
This was before you came.
You know the other guys in the other platoons in your company, like especially the guys that you have been there for a minute, or some of the new guys, like some of the newer guys coming in, like PFCs and privates that are like, they stand out whether they're funny or whatever. You know, there's certain ones that you'll know very quickly, but getting tasked out. That's when you get to learn it. Like, you get to really know everybody. Now, you had mentioned your platoon sergeants, and that really brings me to like a big thing that I want to talk about with you, because this is, I don't know if people realize how important the dynamic between the platoon commander and the platoon sergeant, how important that really is, and how much of an effect it'll have on the way the entire platoon operates together, all the way down to like the fire team level. So you had ended up with, I mean, I can't think of a better example of a phenomenal platoon sergeant than what did he get out as? I don't want to. Gunny is first sergeant, first sergeant Mac, man. He's
oh wow,
just
legend.
Like you can't, like, you talk like salty as it comes. He's been in everything. He was, he's been in the Marine Corps. He was in, the invasion and all that stuff. Super knowledgeable, dude. Watching that guy take down coordinates and map positions on his hand and like doing the radio during a gunfight is one of the most incredible things to watch. Like, I actually did pause many times in the middle of gunfights just to like oh my God, well, you're doing like the craziest, the most complicated stuff over there, and you're doing it on your sleeve and on your hand, and like doing all this. I don't know. The guy was incredible.
Man.
But how like, can you kind of walk us through like what the dynamic there is, like ideally, like what the relationship is, and then how important it is to work towards that kind of a relationship, and then also like because you said it can come back and bite you, trusting your senior guys sometimes too. So the examples of like when it's when it was wise to trust your senior guys, and when it kind of came back and bit you too.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with that, because I can kind of go through the timeline. So I get to the unit. I have basically like corporals running the platoon, and this Sergeant Gutierrez, Sergeant G, and Sergeant Chapman are my senior guys, and they're like not there. Sergeant Chapman, I think, actually was on like some kind of rehab or something, and Sergeant G was, I think, just on leave or something. So I'm there for the first couple of weeks, like just me and these corporals, and they're good to go. I'm Davis, I think, was one of them. Not
Corporal Davis.
Yeah, not the Davis
Corporal
we deployed with, but the other one.
Right.
Corporal Davis was cool too.
Yeah, very good, smart dudes, right? But they kind of already like had their foot out the door. They, I think they were trying to get me geared up, but also at the same time, they didn't have like the experience of.
Not after those two, because those two, the deployments they would have gone on. One was to where did AT Battalion go? Baghdad.
Somewhere outside of Baghdad.
Yeah. And this is not to say that Baghdad was never kinetic for those listening. Sure. It's just at the time frame they went, like the kinetic areas migrate, and you get different regions get different different amounts of gunfights and enemy activity. And by the time our unit would have gone to either Baghdad or Ramadi, most of the fighting had subsided. And so there wasn't, like, I remember that was a big problem for me when we came back from Iraq, and we were getting like our boot drop, all our new guys. I'm a squad leader now, and like now it's my job to make sure they know how to like do all the things they need to know how to do, and then also like things I haven't done since School of Infantry, like put together demolition, like and calculate standoff and all this stuff. It was quite a scramble, like reteaching myself to be able to teach them effectively. It's kind of crazy. You do kind of come into focus though when you have a real deployment ahead of you, I guess. Like
totally.
A real
and that's
deployment.
100%. but yeah, these guys, I mean, they were good to go, but like they just didn't have the experience, and like certainly wasn't in their job description to, you know, mentor and train a new lieutenant, right? So there was a lot of stuff that I was probably doing that was out of my scope as an officer. So I was in the weeds with like, what do we call it? Like rosters to go on the field.
Right,
and like,
right.
The stuff that typically all that stuff that platoon sergeants typically handle, I was kind of in the weeds with. And I think that took me away from what my role should have been. And then, you know, the sergeants come back and they're kind of like new to it too. Sergeant Chapman was the senior guy. So like he became the platoon sergeant, but he was still having all these issues outside of the Marine Corps. So like there was just several months there where I don't think I was just not getting like the mentorship I needed, especially for someone that kind of needed a little guidance, at least at the beginning.
Well, let's talk about too, like all the responsibility you now have on your shoulders. I mean, you're in charge of a platoon of close to 30 guys that will be going to a very kinetic environment in the next, 6-7 months, and it's your job to kind of get them ready and make sure everybody's ready to go. And you're brand new at it. I mean, you've been through training, you've been to school and you've been through training, but you've never actually done this before.
Right.
I would imagine you feel very like almost overwhelmed at some of it.
Totally. And, there were times, and the infantry officer course is also very good at teaching you how to teach, training you how to train. And so there are a lot of like ideas that you have as a platoon commander, and you show up and like, hey, I want to do this range, just platoon. And you go to the CO or the XO, and they're like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Or like, we can't do that because we have battalion training, or we can't do that. Or like, I think there's like a range that I was setting up, and they're like, oh, that looks like really good training. How about we make that a company op?
Right. Right. And
there's
take
a lot of that
completely
shit
out of your
going on.
hands.
Right. And then on the other hand, and then you have, young acting platoon sergeants that are probably being like, I don't want to do that. And like,
I can guarantee you that's what they're thinking.
Yeah. And they're like, sorry, LT, like, this isn't gonna, this is actually a bad idea. And this is where I talk about like, where it can kind of bite you sometimes to fully listen to some of your senior guys, right? Because sometimes they might be acting in their own interest.
Absolutely. If there's a chance to get out of doing something, and it's not like a life-threatening thing that they're trying to get out of, like a police call or a range or something like that, an enlisted guy, junior enlisted guy, for the most part, is going to take just about any opportunity they can to get out of it. And that's just speaking from my own personal experience. But
I agree.
Hey, it's the same for us too.
But it's different when you get when you start getting responsibility, you start looking at the whole enterprise a little different.
Yeah, totally. And so I think there are a lot of things that I wanted to do as like a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young lieutenant that kind of got shot down from all directions because I didn't have a mentor that was there to kind of help me make it happen. And so then that evolved into, I finally got, I don't know if you remember Staff Sergeant Kale, but he was a weapons guy who had gone to the platoon sergeant school, and he was very new to it too. He had just recently been promoted, so he becomes my platoon sergeant. And I think he's trying to figure it all out too, right? Especially because he hadn't been in a line platoon. He'd been in weapons he was a mortars guy.
Which is different. It's very different. I mean, they're similar, but there's a lot of stuff that is different. And you got more guys in a line platoon than in a mortar section.
And especially mortars, the way that they operate. Not the way we operate in Afghanistan, because I think we integrated all the weapons guys pretty well.
Yeah.
But yeah, like traditionally a mortars platoon just operates differently. And so, a lot of the same issues were happening. It kind of culminated. This is where we'll talk about Dean. All right, so I remember with Socks, man, with the whole hazing thing,
and
how
I can remember him standing outside, dude. I can remember that whole thing. And Socks, of all people, was not the one that should have been zeroed in on.
It was all BS.
Socks is like
all cover your ass BS.
It is, because Socks is like the nicest dude in the world too. Like even when he's being mean to you, he's still being nice to you, Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I can remember all that like it was yesterday. But continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Heine kind of gets suspended from being the CO, right? So Dean comes in to be acting CO for a little bit.
And he took us on a monstrous hike.
Oh,
And
that
we-
was.
Oh yeah.
That thing was terrible.
Yep. And that was just a disaster. Oh, so there was that hike, but there was also just this disaster of a field op that we did.
Do you love America Fog of War and want more of it? If so, Brett and I would love it if you became a member of the America Fog of War Patreon. Visit americafogofwar.com and follow the link Become a Member located in the menu at the top of the homepage and pick from one of our 3 membership subscription options. As a member, you can enjoy ad-free early access to all of our free episodes, like this one, as well as gain access to not 1, but 2 extra episodes a month, and join either Brett or myself on a monthly Zoom call where you can help us make decisions pertaining to future episodes of America Fog of War, discuss war movies and books, and talk about some of your favorite American battles and campaigns, hip pocket class style. Your membership subscriptions are what enable us to bring you the content you love every month. Help us grow this podcast and become part of the team today at americafogofwar.com. Didn't we lose something and have to like police call like everybody on a line look for it? Was that not the same field op?
I don't remember that.
Oh, anyways,
I just remember that. I remember that hump. I don't remember the field op before or after, whatever. But I remember him leading us on this.
Dude, all I know is I'm good at hike. Like I was always good at humps. He killed me on that hike, dude. I couldn't. I tried so hard to stay right on him, but he's got those long freaking legs, man. And he just started huffing. We were easily going over 4 miles an hour for that.
Oh
hike.
yeah, and he was pissed because the field op was such a shit show. And I think at some point Staff Sergeant Kale had to leave, so Chapman was in charge as the platoon sergeant, and so like it was me and Chapman, and it was just miserable. It was cold, like nobody wanted to be there. I mean, and so Dean comes to check on my lines, right? We're like in a defensive position, and I'm under the a sleeping bag with Trout, giving him a patrol route, right?
Right.
Dean comes, he thinks I'm asleep.
Oh,
so
no.
he like kicks me. He's like, "Get the fuck up, Lieutenant," you know?
Yeah.
And so like I'm not gonna sit there and be like, "Oh, I actually wasn't sleeping. I was actually," like,
yeah.
I'm just standing there at attention getting my ass chewed.
Right.
And he's like, and so like he's like, let's walk your lines. And of course, I swear to God, I had checked the lines like 5 minutes before. Everything was fine. Everyone was up.
And someone was
5 minutes
sleeping.
later, everyone was fucking sleeping, dude.
Oh no.
It was miserable. So like we're just going like, not everyone, but like position after position we're going, and like people are asleep. And so Dean has my ass, and that was a bad experience I had with him.
Oh.
And anyway, so we I think Hamilton was there at this point too, but we finished the field op. That's when we hiked back, and it was just all miserable. He was pissed, and he basically told me, like, I don't, this is not working out for you. Like, you need to step up your game, or like you should not be a platoon commander. I was like, fuck.
Oh, no.
Right. Well, it makes you focus a little harder, even if it's true or not true. You just start doubling down on your efforts there.
Right. But I will say this about, I want to say Hamilton was there, but whoever it was, the powers that be, fucking Heine, I think Hamilton was there at that point, and then who's our gunny?
Taylor.
Taylor's
the man. He's a gunner now.
Yeah, good.
He needs to be. That's what I said.
Awesome.
Stokes told me. I was like, that's exactly what needed to happen.
Yeah.
He took care of us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, he was amazing.
He's
Oh yeah, I just remember that at CAX, like right before we do like range 400, he's there with ice.
Yeah.
Saving the day. He loved
Man.
He loved like bringing treats to the guys, dude.
Oh,
Anytime he could bring ice or Gatorade or anything, he loved doing stuff like that.
It was awesome. But yeah, they saw something in me, thank God, and they saw like, hey, this guy has potential. We're not gonna get rid of him, but he needs. I think they recognized then that like I hadn't had any good mentors on the enlisted side.
Right.
And that's when they realized like, hey, he just needs a strong counterpart to really help him shine.
Yeah.
In comes Staff Sergeant.
I mean, you talk about the strongest counterpoint you could possibly have, man.
And I think like that. So that's the turning point. You're right. That's where I really start coming into my own as a lieutenant, and where I think that's when it became official. We were going to Afghanistan, right? And so like everything really shifted from there. And Mac, of course, because he's like, not only is he a master at all things Marine Corps, he's also great at playing the game of the politics side. So he brings in Burke, he brings in like these really good
guys that know their stuff, guys that are motivated and are going to do the right thing. Like, say what you want to about Burke, that Joker knew his stuff. I had never even heard the term warbling until he had came around, and it's like a big deal, you know. And like I don't know. He would tell me things, and at the time he'd be telling me, I'd be like, that doesn't sound right at all. And then, sure enough, dude, he would be 100% right. He's an interesting character.
I would tell people, and he's probably the guy I've kept in touch with the most post Marine Corps. But like, you talk about, you know, the senior enlisted like to say, there's no such thing as like a field Marine, right? Like, you're just good Marines or bad Marines. It's like, no. That's Burke was a field Marine. You get him in combat, you get him out in the field, he's in his element, he's the best fucking Marine you could possibly
Right, because in garrison, he just doesn't work for him. He's too goofy for garrison. Like, things don't work right for him in garrison.
Totally. But yeah, man, that's the turning point. And like, I remember the first day I show up and like I'm on the desk and I'm filling out a roster, and Matt comes in. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing, sir?" I'm like, I'm just making the roster for the field op. He's like, "My job, go train the Marines." I'm like, "All right, like, is this how it's supposed to work?" And so that's where, I mean, he and I think he knew that I had work to do and that I had a lot to learn. But I think what he ultimately saw, where we agreed with the most, is that our goal was to take care of the Marines.
Right.
And like we talked about, I mean, the first time we had a sit down and talked about it, we're like, I told him, Mac, you know, my goal is that we're going to go on this deployment. I want to bring them all home. And he's like, I'm glad you said that, because that's what I want. Right. And so like that was the glue that got us together. And then of course, like, we warmed up to each other. Like, he's
right. He's a good dude, man.
And like, it's so funny because the lieutenants would always talk about how afraid we were of him. Right?
How can you not be, though? He's so intimidating, dude.
Guy. He always looks pissed off.
Absolutely.
And that voice, when he wants to yell, dude, there's nobody that does it better. I mean, drill instructors included. That man's voice is unreal.
Do you remember when he fired some of my fire team leaders at CAX?
Yeah. It was bad.
I remember, so me and Hendricks and Harvey were in our tent, in the staff and officer tent, and we're cleaning our weapons, and we're just chilling, cleaning the weapons. We could hear like Miller giving a class, and then Matt comes to me. He's like, "Hey, sir, you know, I don't know if you remember what went down, but there's this whole thing where a couple of my fire team leaders had told some of our junior Marines the wrong pre-deployment leave dates on purpose."
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and guys had bought flights and shit, and then, you know, it was expensive to change them. It was bad. They did that because they thought they were being cute and funny. Also, they just they were guys that had just come from security forces, so they weren't, you know, all that tactically there. But we gave them the chance because they were corporals.
Right.
Anyways, so all this kind of came to a head, and you know, Mac and I had been talking about it the whole time. But he comes to me, he's like, "Hey, sir, you know, we've been thinking about replacing these guys anyway, but I just found out they've been lying to their Marines about pre-deployment leave and blah, blah, blah. So like, what do you want to do?" He's like, "I think we should fire them." I'm like, "I think you're right.
Yeah.
Mac, like, let's do it." So he's like, "Okay." So we continue cleaning our weapons, and then all of a sudden you just hear everything stop. You just hear this resonate throughout the base, and he's just screaming at these guys, like, "You fucking are leaders. You're supposed to be taking care of your Marines." But, you know, like, and I just remember me and Harvey and Hendricks like stop like mid brush and just like staring at each other, the whole, like, dead silent. And then he finishes up and he comes back in the tent and he looks like he's all heated up. He's all like sweating. He's like, and he just starts laughing.
Oh, dude, he's the best,
That's
man.
Awesome. That's incredible.
He's awesome, dude. He is the last guy you ever want to disappoint. Like, I had a moment on our deployment where it was cold, And
I remember.
I peed in a bottle and threw it over the bottle, and they caught me on the. They threw it over the HESCO barriers. I didn't want to go to the piss tubes. It was cold. I was trying to stay like inside, and I threw it over the HESCO barriers.
We saw you on the G-Boss,
and they
dude.
saw me on the G-Boss, dude. And when I came walking over there, Gunny Mac is between like the COC and the officer tent, like the staff and officer tent. He's sitting in that like smoke pit with the camionetting above it, in between.
Yep.
And it's dark, and I can see he has just gotten a cigarette lit, and it's like, he's puffing on it, and I'm walking across that big open space between, like in the middle of the fob there. And he turns, like when I'm like halfway there, he turns and he's like, "Who is that?" And he goes, "Is that Sumner?" Dude, I wanted to say no so bad. I wanted to be like, "No, it's not Sumner. It's somebody else. It is not me." But I said, "Yes, Gunny, it is." And dude, he didn't even yell at me. He looked at me, shook his head, sat back down and said, "All right, we'll deal with it and get out of here." And I was broken for days. I was broken. I let Gunny Mac down as a squad leader, man. Like,
I let him.
A pee bottle all over the wall.
He got me doing the same thing in Iraq on the G-Boss too. but
G-Boss sniper.
But he didn't see me though. It was somebody else. We were getting ready to step out of Eagle Base on foot, and somebody else had done it and took a piss on the T barrier, and I went over and did it by the trench. Well, somebody was like, whoever was doing this has got to go in to the COC. And I'm like, well, shit, it must have been me. Like, I don't know. And so nobody else rogered up. So I walked in there, and the first person I see when I walk in the COC is Staff Sergeant Mac. And then immediately I'm just like, this is not cool.
No, you're in for it.
I didn't want it to be him in there.
Especially on that deployment.
Yeah. And he looked.
You were a new guy.
Yeah, I was first time. New guy. I just picked up Lance Corporal a month before or so, and he barked at me a little bit and said the same kind of thing, like, "We'll deal with you. Get out of here."
And he did.
And then but what he said to me, what I saw was that there was somebody else out there, and I was like, "Well, I didn't go on the T barrier. I went in the trench." He goes, "Oh, well, go find him." So same thing. We found the other guy, and we ended up digging our own piss trench. Like
they had to dig new holes for new piss tubes.
New holes,
like rocks and all. You know, they did like layer it with like the rocks and sand.
It was by the book. The platoon the whole company was taking a Christmas photo. I was not in the Christmas photo. They were sending it home to the families. I was not in the Christmas photo. Me and this other guy were digging this trench so deep. That was not fun. But yeah, he made sure when he said we'll handle this.
He's a man of his word.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I love, so he's so smart because he always knew how to deal with specific Marines. Like, he knew, like, this person needs an ass chewing. This person needs to feel like they disappointed me. This person needs to dig a trench in the middle of the night. Right? Like, he just knew, man. He just knew all the answers.
He's good, man. He's one of the most phenomenal leaders I've experienced in my time in the military or outside of the military, for that matter. Like, he's also one of those guys that would never make his guys do something that he hasn't done or wouldn't do himself. You know what I mean? Dude, like, it's always like he's never gonna push you further than what he would expect out of himself, which is a lot. But when you get to know that about him, it makes doing the really hard stuff a lot less painful. So let me ask you this, like, now that we've got the dynamic between the two of you set up, because if people haven't gathered already, you've got a phenomenal platoon sergeant, and you yourself are a phenomenal lieutenant, and you become better as we get going. So throughout the workup, like, we don't have to go through like step by step, but what are some of the big like takeaways that you have from your experiences on that first workup? What were the things that you wish you would have focused on more, and what were the things that you did do that like made a big difference in the deployment to come?
Yeah. So I think talking about like what we did do that I think we did really well. And I think we just had a very collaborative way of training, if that makes sense. I distinctly remember doing like a MOUT training, right? And like I remember having like a powwow with like Mac and Sergeant T and like Burke. And we're talking about like, it was like the live grenade room.
Do you remember what happened when I took the weapons guys through that grenade room?
No.
It was you and Gunny Mac were the ones, like safety.
Was this where
officer.
Gunny almost got his like ass blown off?
Yes, when Deco
Yeah.
when Deco hit the wall, he hit the wall
Yeah.
in front of the door with the grenade, and it bounced back into the hallway.
So I
with
wasn't
us.
there, but Mac told me about it. Yeah.
Oh my God, sir! I cannot even tell you, like, because I was the squad leader, like running that squad through. I cannot tell you the depths my heart hit before it actually hit the ground. I thought Gunny Mac's dead. I thought the entire, like, I was like, oh my God, that did not just happen for real. Crazy. I'm sorry, I hated it. That just made me think of that range.
No,
It was
no,
a crazy
but
experience.
that's the exact one. And I remember Mac telling me like that, he got everybody in the room, and then he said that he like got in and like clenched his ass to get it out of the hallway, and then it went off.
Dude, I'm telling you, and it was like, one thing that really stood out to me in my early Marine Corps career was at School of Infantry. The first time you go throw a grenade, before I threw it, like the instructors went down like maybe a quarter mile down the trail, like around a bend,
Yeah.
to where the actual range was. They have like a gazebo with some bleachers, or a pavilion with some bleachers set up further towards like the entrance to the road, to the range. And we had like all the SOI students are sitting there, and the instructors go down range to warm up the range. That's what they said at the time. But they're throwing grenades, like they start throwing grenades out on the range. And the first time, everybody's like laughing and joking, and like they're like, you can smoke them if you got them, which is a rare thing in SOI. So like everybody's taking advantage of it. And then all of a sudden the first grenade goes off, like down on the range, and dude, the entire place goes silent. Like every Marine stops talking, stops laughing. It's an eye opener when you hear like how big the blast from a grenade
and you
is,
feel
and like how
that concussion.
powerful it is.
Feel it in your body.
It's violent, man. And having one land in a hallway with you, good Lord. And then also it's like it's all dusty out there and stuff too.
Right.
So after it blew up, you can't see anything.
Because you watch the movies, or when you're doing training and you use the fake ones, like it blows up and you're like, all right, go, go, go. And it's like,
Right.
no, not in real life.
No, you
In real
can't
life,
see
you have
anything.
to let the dust settle. Yeah.
But
Yeah, that was a really fun range. But that one, that sticks out to me because it just showed like the way that we worked together in those moments where you took the rank off, and it wasn't like the lieutenant and the platoon sergeant talking to the squad leaders. It was like 4 dudes that had different experiences on how to clear rooms, talking about the best way to do it and the best way to teach the Marines how to do it.
right.
And like I could tell 1,000 stories of how that played out in different scenarios. So like I remember me and Mac sitting and talking about like, hey, do we want to go into, if you remember, we went into CACs as 2 sections, one led by Morneau and one led by
Right. Which we
by
deployed.
Burke.
We deployed like that.
Yeah, but
Kind of.
we quickly, I mean, as soon as we landed, basically we shifted because we needed like an assault support security setup.
Mm-hmm.
And so we quickly had to shift on that. But like having those conversations with Mac about like how do we set it up? How do we have the sections? Do the sections have 2 big fire teams? Do they have like three small fire teams like normal? Like it was just really cool. Like it was just dudes that knew what they were talking about and had different experiences, just hashing out the best way to do things. And I think that was the best dynamic that we had. And we trusted each other in that way because we knew each other's end goal. We knew that
Right.
each other's end goal was that the Marines were taken care of.
Right.
And that allowed. So that was like, I think what we did really well in terms of training. And so like and then having that trust in Morneau and you guys and Burke to like just to have those moments where you just took a step back and gave a little hip pocket class in the field.
Right. Well, one thing I like to kind of add on to that, because it sounds like essentially like what you mean by that is even though you are lieutenant, you're the platoon commander. Gunny Mac, or at the time Staff Sergeant Mac, is the platoon sergeant. He's a staff sergeant. Like there's a different rank dynamic, even all the way down to me. At the time, I was a lance corporal acting as a squad leader, and you had created this unique environment, which I've only ever seen like one other time, really, and not nearly as much as I have when I like with my time with 3rd Platoon. But you guys had a very good ability at not necessarily dropping the rank, because I'd still always call you sir. I still always call Staff Sergeant Mac Staff Sergeant, or Gunny when he got promoted. But you had an ability to drop like the pretense of like, you got to be super proper with me because I'm your commanding officer or I'm your platoon sergeant, and we're able to actually discuss, I don't know, like strategize on things that are important to your success in an open forum environment. Like and you were also so was Gunny Mac, which is surprising someone with his level of experience would be. But for both of you, we're very open to not only hearing the suggestions but taking the suggestions of the junior Marines, because that's a lot of the times, like there's things that the junior Marines aren't going to know how to do, better, but there are certain things that's the only thing they do. They're the subject matter expert on a certain thing because they do it all the time. Right. And knowing when to take it and run with it, and when to take and whose advice to take is another one. And that, I guess that kind of falls into knowing your platoon and the guys in your platoon. But it seems like if I were to boil it down, like that's the big thing, is you were able to drop the pretense of like this formal military environment, like where you interact with each other to be able to strategize and accomplish a common goal together. But at the same time, like, do you have anything that, I guess, because we're getting ready to step into the first deployment, and that's there's some big things we want to follow up on there as a whole. But getting us there, is there anything that when you get into combat you think, I wish we would have done more of this in training? Or did you feel like you had kind of done everything, you had trained as well as you could to prepare for what you knew you were going to face? Because you only know so much before you get there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Totally.
But I can remember when I got in country, I remember thinking, man, I wish I would have ran more. Even on my own, not with my squad, I wish I would have just ran more, because the altitude was kicking my butt. And then those tilled up farm fields and tough.
It's a really good question, because to the extent that you could prepare for the unknown, I thought we did a pretty good job. But I think there were probably some things that we, going back to that question about the sections and how we felt that our platoon was best set up to be 2 sections at the time, and then we had to quickly shift to the traditional 3 squads in country. Maybe I kind of wish maybe I had found out more about the way that 3-6 was operating. Yeah. Like what we were ripping into to anticipate that, because while Corporal, oh my God, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. Our 3rd squad leader.
Oh, Cox? No. Something like that.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Was it Corporal Cox? Was that his name? Cox?
No.
He came from security forces or something.
He did come, and he had a previous Afghan deployment under his belt too. He had come from 2-8, I believe. He was
a stout dude. He was an athletic dude though.
Yeah,
you remember
he
that?
was.
Stout joke. He's a stout joker.
And he did a phenomenal job. But I feel like we could have prepared him a little bit more, because there were a couple of times where I think he felt like he needed to maybe do as much as Morneau and Burke were doing. So I remember one time they went on a big, plus, how we would roll deep into the Charlie Echoes, right? And and I remember one time he did that himself, and he was all plussed up and had all these different parts, moving parts, basically a platoon size element. And I think they got in a big firefight. I was in the COC, and I think it was a little bit much for him.
It's a lot to handle, man, and manage
totally,
in a combat setting too.
You're a fire team leader and you get thrown into Afghanistan. You're like, oh, by the way, you're a squad leader now.
Right, right. But that kind of stuff happens all the time though, and that's one of the things in training you hear all the time. You got to know the guy's job below you, above you. You got to be able to fill in whatever role. And I guess because even though you've been trained to lead a platoon. Corporal Cook, not Cox. Cook. There you go.
Yeah,
That's it.
Sorry.
That's it. He was He was a good dude. I liked Corporal Cook.
Yeah, very good dude.
Honestly, the setup for the deployment, like all the squad leaders, team leaders, everything was really good in third platoon.
But we could have, I think, had I maybe done a little more homework and tried to be more in touch with our counterparts at 3-6, I could have at least given Cook like the warning order, like, yo, be prepared. We might have to shift things around. I really want you to start mirroring Burke and Morneau, because he did a lot of learning and he did a phenomenal job learning in country. But like,
Right.
we probably would have done him a service to give him a little more of a heads up.
Yeah, just to be a little bit more prepared. Well,
Yeah.
I guess that kind of brings us up to the moment of truth here. So, your first deployment, you're going to Marjah, Afghanistan, and this is still considered the push through Marjah. We're still in the push era of Marjah, and then at the end of our deployment, you got Echo Company going up to Sing and all that stuff. It's very kinetic. I've read things all over the place on it, and I don't know which is truth or just bluster. But I needless to say, it's some of the most kinetic months the Marine Corps has in either Iraq or Afghanistan, and consistently too. That's one thing that really stands out to me about Afghanistan, is just every day kind of a grind. Like, you are going to go get into a fight for sure, especially certain spots in our AO.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. I'm kind of curious, on the battlefield, first off, kind of educate everybody listening. What is the role of a platoon commander on a modern battlefield?
Yeah. On a modern battlefield, and I'm speaking specifically to Afghanistan, and the way that we strategically set up that fight as a squad leader fight, right? So you're talking about, of course, you're having platoon and company size operations when the intel supports it, but on a day-to-day in this battlefield, it was a squad leader fight. And so as a platoon commander and a platoon sergeant, Mac, it was all about setting up our squads for success and providing them the support they needed. And so whether that was making sure that we had good intel for them, had missions and purpose prepared into those missions, right? So like, not just, hey, go walk around for 10 minutes.
Yeah, don't just go do
or
a
for 10
presence
miles.
patrol. Yeah.
Right. Like, hey, here are some homes that we have not visited. We don't know who lives there. Let's go gather intel. Let's establish a presence. Sometimes the mission was, hey, let's do a movement to contact. Okay, we're going to go up north, and we know we want to establish contact and maintain contact with the enemy. So it was just providing that basic support. And so at a tactical level, we always tried to make sure that, we were on the missions that we knew could get more kinetic.
Yeah.
So just to be like a support. And it was, if I patrolled, it was still the squad leader as the patrol leader, but I was there to kind of maybe take a little bit of the burden off the patrol leader to establish that contact with the COC. And it was interesting because each squad leader kind of had a different way that they wanted me to interact on their patrols.
Yeah.
And so like with Burke, who's very experienced, he was like, basically, hey, if we get into some stuff, like, it'll be great to have your help on the radio, but in the meantime, like, basically take out the weapons or like the javelin guys, and you're like the fire team leader. So that was kind of cool. Morneau was like a lot more protective of me because he did not want to be the guy that got the lieutenant killed. So like, he was like, stay close to me, sir, Yeah. And then of course, like when we would get into shit, he and I would, he'd kind of take over the battlefield space, and I would kind of like establish that contact with the COC.
Right. And just so people understand, like, when you do get into a gunfight, I would assume still to this day, but at least while we were in Afghanistan, you're calling everything back into your command center, back on your base, because they're keeping track of it, where you're at on a map, what's happening. It's a continuous play-by-play because they might be calling for fire for you, they might be calling medevacs for you, and then that's also something that you're coordinating as well, like indirect fire, air support. So the handling the battle space, to clarify what he means he's the squad leader at the time, or the patrol leader at the time, is handling the fire teams that are engaged with the enemy and kind of maneuvering them, whereas you're kind of picking up the bigger support stuff, the
right,
calls
and
for
this
fire
isn't
and all that.
right, and this isn't to take away from the squad leaders as well, because they were
it's a lot. It's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, if you got 3 fire teams, 4 fire teams, and then assets with you too, like that's a lot to organize in a battle space.
But they were also, but I'm saying like they were also talking directly to the COC, so it wasn't just like they were doing it through me. But like I was like, if Morneau was providing the COC with our current position, and then starting to get his troops moving, I was probably giving a little more detail on the enemy location to the COC.
Right.
Take that burden off of them.
Right.
Now, there was always a moment in these types of gunfights where you had to kind of make a decision, and this was always the platoon leader's call, right? But are we going to pursue the enemy, or are we going to fix them in place and try to get some kind of supporting fires on them? And that was something that I was very proud of, our squad leaders, because they just kind of always knew like what the right move was, right? And so I very specifically remember this one time. I think it was up with Morneau, and I'm kind of like in my little fighting hole talking to the COC, and all of a sudden I just see like the Marines are just rushing past me, and I'm like, oh, we're moving. And so clearly like Morneau had made that call.
Right.
We're not gonna fucking just sit back and like try to throw bombs on these guys. We're gonna try to get them. Yeah. I think that's when we seized that PRK, if you remember.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
It took a while to get pretty good at the fire maneuver. I think first month or 2 in country, it's not really so much fire maneuver, but as you're there, month 4, 5, 6, that fire maneuver part of it got way better.
Well, you got to get used to how to like moving on the terrain, because the distances for me, like realizing in actual combat, like at least in that setting in Marjah, like the terrain that Marjah has is long distance, man. Like you're moving long distances on those on your fire and maneuver elements. Like whoever's maneuvering is not maneuvering. I'm up, he sees me, I'm down. He's like, they're getting up and scooting for a long ways to be able to get around, around a flank of the enemy, or at least to get a better position on them. Now that being said, so we're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes of the stuff. So let me ask you this. I don't know if you were with me on my first one, because my first gunfight was I was on a patrol with Burke, and we were walking from one compound to another, and it had turned into a ghost town, and it just, boom, right off started going. It was crazy. We got, and I want to say we were out there. Remember when we first got there, they didn't want us patrolling from like 11 to 2 o'clock because it was too hot. Do you remember that?
Oh, I kind of remember that.
Just at the very, very beginning of the deployment. Well, we had gotten stuck out there and ran out of water. And so some other squad or platoon had to bring us water. And I remember it was a very miserable day. But no one got killed. No one got killed, which was good. But that being said, like I learned a lot of very valuable lessons very quickly in my first gunfight, and I'm kind of curious from a leader's perspective and a platoon commander's perspective, and then just from your own personal perspective, what was your first firefight like, and what were some of the lessons learned?
Yeah.
Being a U.S. Marine and fighting for my country is one of the things in my life I am most proud of. Although there are so many positives that came from my experience in the Marine Corps, like many of you, I had another battle I had to fight when my service was done. It's no secret that PTSD affects many active duty and former servicemen and women every day, as well as their family members and the first responder community. If you or a family member is struggling with PTSD, Colby and I recommend looking into the Mighty Oaks Foundation for help in your battle with this condition. The Mighty Oaks Foundation is a faith-based veteran service organization that teaches combat veterans struggling with post-traumatic stress how to get beyond combat trauma and live their lives in the manner God intended. Many combat vets are unable to reintegrate back into civilian life, leaving their families to deal with the aftermath of broken homes and suicide at times. By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these warriors are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. Their mission is to serve and restore our nation's warriors and families who have endured hardship through their service to America, and to help them find a new life purpose through hope in Christ and their resiliency and peer-to-peer recovery programs. More than 4,000 alumni have participated in Mighty Oaks programs, as they maintain one of the highest success rates of any recovery program in preventing veteran suicide and divorce. In fact, the programs are so successful that they receive hundreds of active duty military on official orders each year. Additionally, through a proactive effort, Mighty Oaks has provided resiliency programs to over 150,000 active duty troops on military bases worldwide. Find more information on the Mighty Oaks Foundation by visiting americafogofwar.com and follow the link Mighty Oaks Foundation located in the menu at the top of the homepage. Never fight alone. Get some backup in your fight with PTSD today.
So I'm very lucky because I had like a baby step of a firefight. So my first firefight was actually, we were in a compound. I remember like the OPs that we had along the route Elephant or whatever. So we were in one of those. I was with Cook Squad, and they just start shooting at the compound. And I remember getting up, and I think at this point, most everyone except like me and a couple guys had not been in a firefight, so I hadn't been in one yet. But like, I remember getting up and like looking at, I forget who I was looking at. I was like, is this happening? Like, we're getting shot at? Like, this is happening.
Yeah.
And
that's the feeling everybody has, I feel like.
What was that?
That's exactly the same thing that happened. Like Nordman, you remember Nordman turns around, and after we get the first burst shot at us, he turns around and looks at me and goes, did we just get shot at? And then you get another one comes in, and yes, obviously you're getting shot at. But there is like that, it takes a moment to like you've been waiting and training for this for so long, and then it happens, and you're like, is this it? Is it actually happening? Like it was for me at least a moment of like deep realization there.
Totally.
But
I think from a personal level, I think just seeing how everyone reacted, and including myself, everyone kind of just knew what to do, right? Everyone immediately, our post started returning fire. Everyone started gearing up to get up on the wall to return fire. And like, so I get up on the wall to kind of see what's going on, and I see the enemy. That's probably the clearest in all the firefights I'd ever been. That first one was probably the clearest I had seen the enemy in my scope, and I returned fire. And then I remember I look back, and I see Davis, and he kind of looks at me. He's like, yeah, get it, sir.
Davis is the man too. Well, if anybody's going to be cheering you on, it should be Davis.
Right. And like in my mind, I'm like, this is not my job. Davis, get up here. And of course, he's got the 203 too. So I'm like, Davis, get up here. And so then that's when I immediately get on the radio, and I'm giving her. They had our position already because it's the OP, and actually this was a good time. Nielsen was actually in the COC, so he had the authority to approve 60s, and we had 60s there at the base.
Nice.
And so I was able to talk directly to Nielsen and be like, hey, we want to shoot some 60s here.
And so 60s, for those listening, are mortars. They're the smallest mortar, at least like in an line infantry platoon. There our mortar asset are 60s. Sorry, right. Keep going. Sorry. That way, so anybody that doesn't know can kind of follow along with us a little bit.
Totally. Yeah. So we had, our post returning fire. We had guys up on the wall returning fire, 203s, small arms, saws. And then, we kind of fixed the enemy in a ditch, and then we threw some mortars on them. So I was lucky because it was kind of like a controlled environment in a way, because we were protected by the compound. And so we were able to, it was kind of like running a drill, like for practice almost, because we had that protection. So I think that was, so like from a tactical standpoint, a platoon commander perspective, I was just super proud of everyone, including myself, on like just being able to get the drill going and do the right things. And then on an individual level, it's popping that cherry, right? And like realizing that I can get shot at and not get killed, and we can engage with the enemy. And, thank God they suck at shooting, because we can engage with the enemy in the open even, and have not a minimal risk, but a reduced risk of getting hurt as long as we're moving and maneuvering. Right. So that realization that like, this is not, it's not like the movies where people are like, they feel the gunfire is going over their head constantly.
Right.
There are moments when that's happening, but it's not constant. There are pauses in the battle where you can stop and take the tactical step back, and really get your fire drill going and do the right things. It was kind of eye opening to see that, you know, we had all the skills we needed. We, you know, thankfully, because of our positioning and because of our ability to maneuver, you know, there's a reduced risk of us really taking on heavy casualties. So it was a great moment to realize all those things that could come together. And I just carried that with me throughout all the other firefights, is that, hey, you just kind of do your job and everything kind of works out when it does.
Yeah, man. I mean, that is the truth. And that's the nice thing about the way the Marine Corps does things too, as far as everybody doing what they have to do, is because you've drilled it so much by that point. And I feel like that's just about every unit in Marine Corps infantry. You are going to run drills constantly for the things that you encounter, like that you would be expected to encounter on a regular basis in combat. Yeah. Do you have any questions?
Oh, no, I was just going to say some of the drilling and some of the training that we had done sometimes would seem repetitive or redundant, and it's almost as if, like, why do I got to do this? But in these moments where this just takes off 0 to 100, that training where you thought, wow, these are just I'm changing mags on an empty rifle just repeatedly, and I don't want to do this. It just kicks in, like every little step of the way of that training, of any training, comes together and everybody's on the same page.
You're so right, man. I remember, you know, when we would do training and all those little moments where there's not a lot going on, you're kind of waiting for the next thing. You know, I had a lot of guys that would stop and they would do like mag drills, and they would they'd make it a competition too sometimes.
Do it faster,
do the fastest, and like it's just this little thing that you don't think about. And I remember like being in a firefight and watching somebody change out their mag and being like fucking so flawless and perfect at it.
It's just
like,
muscle memory now.
Right. Yeah.
The muscle memory is a huge part of all this.
I want to ask you, so now we talked about the first gunfight and kind of like easing into it a little bit. Let's talk about when things start getting a little more intense, because as we're there, like I remember the very beginning, it almost seemed that way to me, even though like I wasn't in a controlled environment. Things were definitely still happening. In our first month and a half in country, I mean, we had gotten into quite a few gunfights, but I had felt like it was almost like the realism, not that it wasn't real, but it did feel like almost like a controlled environment. Like nothing's going to happen to me. They can't shoot that good. Everything's good. But then somewhere along the way, like, you know, the mood towards that, and maybe it's because the intensity of the gunfights escalated slightly, especially there towards the end, because that was the last little bit of the Taliban forces there. So they were fighting, I would imagine, a lot harder than they were to begin with. But as gunfights start, you know, increasing in complexity and intensity, for instance, like coming back from that op with the Brits, north of our fob there. What kind of things are you gaining? Like, you know, what lessons are you learning? What are things that are eye-opening to you? And then, you know, also, what are some of the things that you see happen in combat that just kind of blow your mind a little bit? Like there's so many things, so many special things that I feel like I got to witness. And most of the time it's from the youngest guys there, you know? And so what are some things like that stand out to you? And as the fighting got a little more serious and chaotic, you know, what did it do for your take on leadership and your role in the platoon?
So I don't know if you realized this at the time or if we even communicated it, but there was a period there, and I think it correlates to this switch, right, where we do start seeing more intense gunfights, where we started getting Pakistani Taliban into the AO, and
they were good.
Yeah, mm-hmm. and they didn't care if they lived or died, right? So there was this intensity that they fought with. Before, if you remember, in some of our initial gunfights, as soon as we got like air on station,
gone.
It just
Can't find it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Whereas I remember very distinctly a couple of, I I think our squad was on patrol and a squad from 2nd Platoon was on patrol, and they kind of got in a gunfight with some guys. And it was awesome. This was one of those moments where Mac was in like our little makeshift COC and one of the OPs, like coordinating this fight with 2 separate squads from 2 different platoons and moving. It was
just a mastermind of the battlefield, dude.
It was
watching him do that, just so everybody knows what we're talking about. He's got these map pins out. He's got like 3 different colored map pins out. He's got a radio literally like tied to his head. How he would hold it on there with his beanie or something. I don't remember how he would like position it, but he would have the green gear, like the phone piece on his like attached to his head. He'd have the black gear like hanging right here so he could like hit both. And then he'd be on a map writing stuff and then keeping updates of like positions of friendly units on his hand and forearm. And then he'd like, he'd lick his thumb, wipe it off or whatever, and like he's doing this for like multiple moving parts and keeping it organized. The guy was incredible. I remember that gunfight that you're talking about because we had just launched a patrol. I was in the not ECP. I was in the little
OP3
outpost. I was in. OP3.
This story is this north of OP3?
Yeah, but I think I was actually coming out of OP2 because you guys would have been in OP3. You and the other squad, I think, were down in OP3. Anyways, we had just stepped off on that patrol and we were on 608, like walking across it to go north, and we hear the gunfight kick off. And so whoever was leading the patrol gets on the radio with Gunny Mac, and there he's like, "Yeah, go on down and help him out." And we're walking. We took the road. We walked. I don't know why we did that, but we took the road down to you guys, and when we got within like, I don't know, 150 yards, 200 yards of like where we needed to turn off the road to start heading north, towards you guys. Rounds start skimming off the concrete like in front of us, which sounds wildly different than dirt. It's got a different zing to it. But I remember that vividly. I lost my Oakleys. They fell out of my drop pouch, and when I came back, some little Haji kid was wearing them, and they were all like scraped up and like mangled. So I just let them keep them. But
that's funny.
I do remember that. So, in that gunfight, there's a lot going on. There's 2 squads. What do you take away from it? What happens in it that stands out to you?
Well, I think what I remember taking away at the moment was like, okay, these guys are getting better, because this is one where we brought in some air. I don't think they were going to drop anything, but just the presence of air to try to scare them away.
Right.
And they kept fighting. And so in thinking like, okay, these guys are different. This feels different, but our guys are also have some experience under their belt now.
which is noticeable too. That is such a noticeable thing. I even noticed it on myself. Like I got really nasty with that 203. You know what I mean? Like you get really good at what you're doing. Anyways, sorry to interrupt there. It's just a point that stands out to me.
And we talk a lot about, I mean, in this example, we're talking a lot about how amazing it was to see Mac do what he was doing and coordinating these units. But the reason he was able to is because our guys had gotten so good at their fire drill of, all right, we take contact, we return fire, establish contact, return fire, and then we immediately start giving up our reports. And because they were, and as they're moving, as the squads are moving, the squad leaders are constantly feeding that to the COC. So that coordination, had improved from day one to the point where we could do these kinds of operations where things were coordinated so well. And so when you have the units that are constantly giving us a sit rep, and we're literally, I remember being in there moving the pins on the map as our units are moving, and then also taking the enemy positions that both units are giving and kind of trying to triangulate where the actual enemy position is.
Yeah.
Like all of that coordination only happened because we had done it already. And maybe it was slower before, but at that point we had really learned how to fight the fight there, right? We learned how to fight that specific fight, which required a lot of communication, a lot of coordination, and and just a lot of balls from our Marines, right?
That's
That
right.
is true, especially sometimes.
And you get to practice it almost every day now. So if you
That
did,
is the thing too. So
you
let's
did something on Monday, you'll do it tomorrow.
Right.
Better.
let's talk to that a little bit.
Well, yeah, because you had asked, like, what did I see that kind of like surprised me? And I'll never forget. I don't even remember one of the combat engineer guys. He was a little guy. He was probably like smaller than me, skinny little dude.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember his name. He was tiny. And I remember being in like a canal with him as we're taking fire, and him just without even, I don't know, like he knew that the units were moving forward. I was on the radio, and he kind of just like saw his moment and just got out of the canal and just ran through an open field to get to the next piece of cover through like open fire. And I'm like, damn, that's ballsy. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, man. Listen, I'm all about maneuvering under fire. Like I can handle being shot at and still having to do my thing. But when you get out into the wide open and there's like active rounds skirting across that space, that's a different ball game, dude. Wide open, no cover, no nothing. Like I'd only been, actually, to my knowledge, I've only been caught in a flat out open field, like in an ambush once. And it's the only time, you know, they talk all the time about if you take contact, hit your belly. Like that's what you learn all the way through boot camp and all that stuff. It's the I'm up, he sees me, I'm down kind of concept, right? Which is useful in a lot of areas, but in Marjah, not really useful. You don't want to get stuck out in an open field. There's nothing to hide behind. Well, it caught me so off guard that I straight up just belly flopped on the ground. It was like an immediate reaction. I couldn't even help it. And I did it so hard, everybody around me thought I had gotten shot. I was like, no, I'm good. Get going. You know, like I came to, like, realized what I was doing and started huffing it for a canal. But yeah, man, it's like, to me, I think about when you mention, you know, like guys doing stuff like that, I also think, man, just to give the listeners an idea, you know, I don't want to exaggerate, and I don't want to like say we did more than we did, but from my recollections of it, I mean, if you were to discount maybe the first 2 weeks in country and the last 2 weeks in country, there's very few days that go by without a gunfight that I remember. Like it was an everyday thing, and in certain AOs, obviously the gunfights would be worse, like certain areas of the AO, but you were going to always have something to deal with. I mean, every time you stepped outside the wire, it was game time. It really didn't matter where you're going. It's always game time. And there's something about that grind, because I noticed it in myself, but I also noticed it in other people as well. Like, you get halfway through that deployment and, like, you can't pop bubble wrap around anybody. You can't shut any doors too loud. Nobody's sleeping. I was taking so many Benadryl to go to sleep at night. It was crazy. And still waking up and operating like fine, you know, and not, you know, it's, you go through a lot on the experiential scale, and it starts affecting people. And I'm kind of curious, because that's what always kind of baffled me, is I knew what it felt like, and I knew, like, towards the end you start thinking, man, I want to go home. Like, I don't want to get killed right before I go home. And you see these, you know, 18-year-old kids suiting up and going out every day like nothing, you know, like that's just what I'm doing, and they do it with a smile on most of the time, which always was amazing to me. You know, kids that are like old enough to be in high school or out fighting for the finest fighting force in the world. It's and doing a very, you know, a very difficult job in that time. So I'm kind of curious, though, from like a leadership perspective, because I know you had to have noticed that transition as well, like the mental shift when we got to the latter portion of that deployment. And, you know, guys are having a hard time sleeping. Guys are jumpy. Guys, their attitudes might be a little bit on edge. Like, you don't want to push, you know, like there's a little bit of a feel like you don't want to push too much because you might get a terrible reaction, you know? Yeah. How do you handle that as a leader in combat with, like, you know, you still maintain the discipline and what you expect out of a military unit, but also like with enough understanding where you're not, you know, you're not just brushing feathers to brush feathers, you know what I mean? Like, like it's a very touchy time frame. Guys are real on edge, and man, their nerves are fried. They've been on high charge for five months at this point. You know, how do you deal with that as a commander?
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember this, and then, you know, for the audience, so we had sectors of the operational space that were designated by a alpha reference. So it was like Charlie Echo, or like there was the Charlie sectors, right? And
Charlie Echoes were the ones.
And so we'll refer to the Charlie Echoes as like, that was probably one of the most kinetic areas. And you knew if you were going up there, I remember it was like the
9-2.
Like the 9-2, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, you knew if you were going north of that, you were going to get in a fight. Like, it was guaranteed. And so I think there's a point where Mac and I kind of saw a lot of the things, observed a lot of the things that you're talking about here. And we really had to sit down and talk to our command, like the command too, and say, like, what is the tactical advantage we're getting from being up in the Charlie Echoes every day? Like, are we gaining anything from it? Right? Is it really helping us win the war in Afghanistan? And I think ultimately the answer was no. But we knew that we still had to maintain contact up there. So like, we definitely sent missions up there when we had to. But I don't know if you remember, we kind of put a moratorium on going up to the Charlie Echoes at one point.
Right. And we only did it on, like, I remember one of the I don't remember like one of the, like, the last ones before that went into effect, but I do remember, like, after that moment, it would be kind of a bigger deal to go up there. Mm-hmm. And like, usually we plus up really big, so you have everybody going, oh, take me, you know.
We get air support.
Yeah.
I remember Vetrano being pissed because he wanted to go up there every day.
Right. And you got guys like that too. Like, you have guys that, which I don't even know if deep down they actually want to fight every day, but I think that, like, that's where they're comfortable with their engine running. You know what I mean? Like, that's where they feel kind of secure, and it makes the time go by faster too. I think for some guys, man, I think the deployment, having nothing to do, scares them more than getting into a gunfight, because it can be super boring if you have nothing going on.
I agree with that.
Without naming names, and you'll probably figure out who it is, but there's someone on the platoon who's wanting to get into every single gunfight. Every major patrol we had, they were there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Mac telling me on the deployment, we need to keep an eye on him when we get back, because he's used to this high and this fix, and he's going to find it somewhere. So we just got to keep an eye on him. And sure enough, when we got home, there were some issues there, but like, you're constantly just monitoring how people are doing, because you need them to throttle up to that level if you need them to, but at the same time, you want to, make sure that they're not pushing it over the limit.
Right, or at least in a sustainable way. Because like, you stay throttled up too long, and you'll burn right out, man. And that's where you get like the worst cases of the depression and PTSD and all that stuff and I think that's honestly part of how it sets in, at least through this avenue, like repeated combat exposure, and instead of like the one and done big battles. Like, if it's a repeated daily thing, I think it's being so wired up continuously, you don't have time to come down from it. And I remember, like, they gave us a briefing about like, they did a color coded scale for your, like, adrenaline levels, and I think it started at like a white, and then it was green or yellow or green or something like that. And it goes all the way up to black, like red, then black is the highest. Yeah. And they were talking about, if you're in a car accident, your adrenaline might go up to red if it's a really bad one, but they were saying the importance of that is once your adrenaline goes to that level, anytime your adrenaline kicks on from that point, it will go back to that level. It doesn't step back down to the other ones. Like, anytime you turn the faucet of adrenaline back on, it's just going to go right back to red. Well, they said true combat, gunfights and all that stuff, is one of the few ways you can actually enter into the black portion of adrenaline. And so now you have, all these kids that are in their 18, 20 years old time frame, somewhere in there. Their adrenaline's definitely all the way up to black, and it's doing it on a daily basis, just day after day after day, to the point to where it's almost like it doesn't come back down. It just stays there.
Yeah. And you got to remember too that, like, the human brain doesn't fully finish developing until, I think, around the mid-20s, right? Like 25.
Right. So it's all affecting. It affects everything. I mean, and that's why you have guys talk about they've gone in and like, I came out different, because you are still developing, but you went through an astronomical event, like a life-changing event, and I like you brought up the guy that was like, that's such a thing that I feel like not a lot of people really think about, is the guy that was on all the patrols and wanted to be in all the gunfights, and then gets back from the deployment, and now he has a problem because he has to replace that somehow.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side too, you have guys that you get towards the end and they're like, I don't want to go on any more patrols. You know,
Yeah,
you have that
burnout.
too. You have that too, and like they're doing anything they can to I'll stand post, or I'll do this, or I'll do, so they don't have to go, and that all affects not only like the effectiveness of your unit, but the morale of your unit. And I think you handled it very well. I mean, you and Gunny Mac did a phenomenal job on that deployment. But just curious, like for future leaders out there, are there any specific strategies, I guess, when you do come across some of these guys that are having a hard time either way? Is there like a specific strategy you take in addressing it, and how you would go about addressing it with those Marines?
I mean, really, it just comes down to doing your best to know your Marines and to know your people. And I don't know if you remember, like being on that deployment, I made it a point to kind of go into the tent with you guys every day. Just even if it was just like poke my head in there, hey, what's up, guys?
Yeah.
Like
we talk
2
Harry
seconds.
Potter books, man.
Exactly. Oh man, those books are probably still out there somewhere.
Probably. I couldn't believe it when you finally lent me your Kindle. Man, I think it was like the last 3 books or something were on the Kindle, and I crushed them so fast. I wish I read at the same the same frequency that I read when I was in Afghanistan. Man, I'd be a brilliant man by now.
Me too.
All I did
read
was
more
read.
books there. Yeah. But yeah, it really just comes down to just trying to be as aware as possible, and that's just getting eyes on the guys. And Mac did the same thing. You always make it a point to go into the tent just to check up, not trying to be assholes and like get in your space, just like
right.
Because you can see sometimes somebody's being a little quiet that's not usually quiet, or somebody that's maybe sleeping more than they typically do. So trying to identify those folks, and then just listening to the leadership too. So listening to you, listening to Burke and Morneau and Cook, and like, hey, what are the guys feeling right now? How are they coping? So just having that awareness, and then you can make, because that goes into the whole equation, and then you have to start conversations Mac and I would have is like, okay, how do we accomplish the mission, whatever the mission was? How do we accomplish the mission, take care of the Marines, but also keep ourselves engaged enough in the battle that we are, also maintaining like an offensive posture, right?
Right,
Because
like AO security and keeping
Right.
what you've gained, not losing any ground, because that's kind of what happened. We don't need to go anywhere into this topic, but from what I understand, that's kind of what happened in Sangin and why Echo Company got sent up that way.
Yep.
Was
Yep.
kind of they just kind of fell back on patrolling what they had already gained, and it just fell right back into like enemy area.
Yeah, and that was even before 3.5. That was initiated. 3.5 got the brunt of it, but it was really the Brits that were up there that kind of, once they would push out a little bit, they would take all these casualties. The ID situation up there was insane.
Insane. We'll have to do like a special on that at some point, because just like the stories I heard, just being in country, and like there's no way I heard any of the worst ones, but just when they were getting ready to send Echo Company up there, and like the Lance Corporal Underground, you hear all kind of rumors and stuff. The things that I heard about it sounded terrible. Yeah. Like having to use an APOBs for everywhere they want to walk. First off, whoever is the poor guy having to carry the APOBs, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Those things are
those
horrible.
Things are
They're so
unbelievably heavy.
They're so awkward. Oh, it's the worst, dude. It's the worst. And then to have to carry enough of them to use it for your entire patrol. I mean, dude, no thank you.
Yeah, forget it.
No thank you.
No, you're absolutely right. And there's a different battle up there completely.
So let me ask you here. This deployment to Marjah in 2010, our deployment, what does that deployment mean to you now? Like we talked about, what it was like there, what you're thinking in the moment there, what you're thinking, how did it handle this, handle that? What does it mean to you now? And I know it's a tough question, but.
Yeah, no, I think the answer is something along the lines of kind of a whole life lived in in a short period, right? Like all the emotions of like happiness and loss and excitement and fear and just basically like a lifetime's worth of these ups and downs, all like condensed into 6 months.
Yeah.
And you take any situation that you face now in the real world, and you can always kind of tie it back to a situation you faced then.
Yeah,
certainly.
Yeah. And like you are a changed person after experiencing something like that. And it's kind of up to you to figure out the way to benefit from that.
Yeah, whether that changes for the better or for the worse. That's on the individual for sure.
Right.
Well, I'm sure.
And for some people, it's hard to overcome. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. For some people, it is, and I think that deviates into so many different avenues. That could be they get out without a purpose, or that could be there's so many reasons as to where that comes from.
Yeah, because I don't want to frame it because I'm saying that it's kind of up to you to try to make that what happened to you kind of purposeful in your life.
Right.
But I don't want to kind of take that to sound like if you don't get if you aren't able to figure that out, that it's on you, right?
Because it's a hard thing to figure out.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to figure out. Getting out of the Marine Corps period was hard to figure out, man.
Yeah.
That is a doozy of an experience.
Well, Jade, it's all like, hey, how about we transition out of the Marine Corps? Well, I've been out almost 11 years now, and it's still a transition. So you look at some of the good times and the bad times, however you handle it or not. Coming out of the deployment, what does it mean? Like, well, your leadership ability as a young lieutenant in the Marine Corps really exploded. It just, in 6 months, you have all these feelings and experiences, and it just takes off. So, I mean, that's something different to think about. But yeah, of course, and we haven't even experienced, even though we've been out 10 years, like, there's still things we're going to have to experience, I think, because we're still generally really young.
Yeah. But also you get in war, man, when you're really getting after it like that, you get the wide berth of human emotions, and you get them strongly too. They hit really hard. But I'm so glad we got to have you on here. And I'm now, just for everybody listening, he did have another deployment. He went back to Marjah in 2010 to 2011. I'm sorry, that was all jacked up. That first deployment was 2010 to 2011.
Correct.
You went back 11 to 12 for a second time, correct?
You got back in February of 11, and you went back in December.
Yes, yeah, and I was Advon, so I went like in November.
Wow. Yeah, and
that's a quick turnaround.
Advon, for everybody listening that doesn't know, that's like the advanced party. Your command will usually send out, a handful of officers and staff NCOs to go get things ready for the unit coming in. Your unit coming into the area of operation. So on that second deployment, you have a different role. You're on an advisor team, and I would love to have you back on and kind of talk about that a little bit, and how that experience was different than this first one, and what you took from the first one that helped in the second job, and what things you kind of had to let go of that didn't necessarily work in that second job. There's all kind of stuff I'd be very interested to hear. But
I'd love to.
But thank you so much for joining us. We got to get you out here to Gettysburg, get you in the studio.
For sure, man. Love to see you guys.
Oh man, it'd be great. Well, it was great getting to see you on Zoom regardless. It was a good little hang session. And
likewise. One thing I'll say is, and you probably feel this too, and a lot of veterans feel this, is like, you kind of, after experiencing something like that, you kind of never truly get to be yourself in a lot of environments.
Right.
And these are the moments where, like, I live for, man, because I feel like I'm an open book.
It's a happy place. It's a happy place kind of a thing, man. Like anytime because before I moved here, Tommy and I would talk on the phone almost every week, and it's like it's a good refresher, man. Nobody, you just aren't the same with other people that you are with your war buddies. And just different. It's just different. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, make sure you never miss new ones by subscribing to the show on your podcast app of choice. And if you want to help us out with growing the show and enable us to bring you better content and more of it, then Brett and I ask that you leave us a 5-star review. It does a lot in helping us. Brett and I thank you for listening, And until next time, stay frosty.